We are continuing our stories from Mission for Healthy Heroes, partly because we ran out of time, and the other reason is that I was self producing and couldn't read messages and didn't properly get a link to my next guest. How are you doing? Is it Dr. Glass or
It is not. I appreciate that thought, though, that many people actually will walk into our clinic and think that I am um, a doctor. However, I am not. I do run a hyperbaric clinic. We do have an overseeing physician in that hyperbaric clinic who clears our patients for treatment and provides us with prescriptions for treatment. But I am an individual who came to hyperbarics in order to really improve people's lives, to give people hope in their lives who otherwise really don't feel like it's there. They don't feel like the support is there. They don't feel like, in a lot of cases, and this is particularly with veterans, where they you don't feel like they want to be here anymore. And we want to actually really transcend that and move people beyond that. Um, and yes, I do get mistaken being a physician on occasions.
well, joining us is George Glass. George, can you explain to people out there who might have an idea or maybe not even have a clue, what is a hyperbolic treatment? Hyperbaric.
So, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT, as you'll see it on the internet when you surf and look for information. So the process of hyperbaric oxygen therapy is actually treating somebody under increased atmospheric pressure. So any of you out there who are in the Navy, you get this because you lived it. Um, so you are under increased atmospheric pressure while you're breathing either concentrated or medical grade oxygen. What does that do? So basically, what hyperbarics does is it's very simple, and it doesn't matter what we're treating. The pressure dramatically reduces inflammation throughout the system and in the body. So, in our case, and we're talking about programs we run for veterans with traumatic brain injuries, post-concussive syndrome, and even PTSD, the reality is those conditions are a result of the inflammatory process in the brain, in this case. So we're dramatically reducing inflammation, and then we're maximizing the oxygenation of the blood plasma. And it's able to get into areas it wasn't able to get into before because the inflammatory process was inhibiting circulation, which carries the essential nutrients for cellular health. When it comes to brain injuries and that, we're just talking about neurological cells in the brain. But it's not a targeted treatment. Uh, it's not just going to treat a traumatic brain injury. It's not just going to treat uh, PTSD. Uh, it actually has a fully systemic impact. So, if you were coming in and you were being treated for that, and at the same time you had a cut that won't heal on your foot at the other end of your body, it's actually going to impact and help the healing process with that as well.
Let me ask you a question, and this really just kind of popped up to me. What is somebody using a CPAP machine? Is it similar? Because the CPAP machine is shoving that it's not the medical grade oxygen, obviously, but it is shoving more oxygen into your body. Is it a similar act, or is it completely different?
Yeah, so the mechanism of action, so to speak, so how it works, it's actually very different. Usually, CPAP machines in that are used in instances where they're actually, and you said it, they're actually just forcibly um, infusing you with oxygen or concentrated oxygen. And the reason is that you have an obstruction, you have the inability to actually bring that in. And I have lived and been around people with like Lou Gehrig's disease, for instance, ALS, and they don't have the ability to breathe on their own. So you are actually mechanically helping them to breathe. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is really very different in that case. So what we're doing is taking people who generally they have the ability to breathe quite well, or it's even inhibited. We've actually treated quite a number of people with COVID long haulers, and they have continued symptoms. Uh, and actually, Zach, that call I was talking to you about, we were actually talking about COVID long haulers, and you can actually look at brain imagery, and it actually depletes the blood flow to the brain in some cases, and that's where these symptoms come up. So, without getting too much down the rabbit hole with the physiology and that of it, quite simply, it is about that reduction of inflammation. So to use a great example, and again, if you're a diver or you were in the Navy, serving in the Navy, so the bends,
Yep.
how
Yep.
do what's the treatment for the bends? A hyperbaric oxygen therapy chamber. That is the treatment. It is the only treatment for it. And how it works is this: you have all those frothy bubbles that are in your vessels, and the pressure actually compresses those bubbles so that they're so small that they actually escape and go out through the vessel walls. And then you're oxygenating that individual. So again, that's how it works. And again, it doesn't matter what we're treating. If it's the bends or a traumatic brain injury, or we've treated people for mold toxicity and Lyme disease, macular degeneration, uh, and everything in between. So there's really very few limitations to the use of hyperbarics in oxygen therapy.
Can you give me an example of what happens when somebody comes in for a treatment? What do they go through?
Oh, so it actually depends. We have both a medical grade chamber or a hard-sided chamber, what they call a hard-sided chamber, monoplace or one person, although in our chamber we can actually treat two people at once in our medical grade chamber. We also have what's called a mild hyperbaric chamber, a soft-sided chamber. The soft-sided chamber, we don't need medical clearance for that, for the use of that. It's a lower atmospheric pressure. We're using concentrated oxygen. The medical grade chamber, however, because oxygen is considered to be a drug, needs a prescription for us to treat. So that's actually step number one, is to be cleared in the medical grade chamber, and we are provided with a prescription. As far as the patient's concerned, once they walk in the door, we actually go through and walk them through the entire process of what to expect during a session, depending on whether it's the mild hyperbaric chamber or the medical grade chamber. We walk them through everything they're going to experience. We talk them through, um, and some of this is really about making this a very comfortable process
Mhm.
because, hey, you're getting in a chamber. It's unusual. It's strange for most people. Again, unless you've been treated for the bends, you spent time in the Navy, or actually you were a pilot, where they just use the inverse process for training pilots. But um, we walk them through so each individual is comfortable when they get in the chamber with the treatment process, how the communication happens in that, and it's different between the two chambers. What they can or cannot bring into a hyperbaric chamber. Um, Limitations before or after, which actually there aren't any. That's actually a question that happens all the time with people. They'll ask us. One of the other really popular questions people ask us, well, you're monitoring the chamber, but what if something happens to you? You're monitoring the chamber. How do I get out? We actually show because even our medical grade chamber has the ability to self decompress it. So there are controls actually within the chamber that allow an individual to let themselves out of the chamber. Same with our mild hyperbaric chamber. It's a wonderful safety feature in the chamber that we have. It makes people more comfortable. Um, uh, Questions around another popular question when it comes to hyperbarics is claustrophobia. Am I going to be in this tight confined space, or is it like an MRI? That those two questions come together quite often. So, no, it's not like an MRI, and here are the reasons why. Number one, it's quiet. Number two, you do not have to stay still. You can move around as much as you like in our chamber and get comfortable. It's like getting into bed, quite honestly. There's a mattress in there, you have a pillow, you have your blanket, you have a towel uh, in that chamber. And in those chambers, if you like to bring your favorite book in there, you can read a book. The only things that are no-goes in there, really absolute no-goes, are no electronics whatsoever. Uh,
Only
and
no
the
smoking.
no smoking, yes. There's an absolute.
Yeah, yeah, I don't see anybody sitting in there throwing matches. Uh, so
So
that
yeah,
that
so
probably wouldn't be a good
we
idea.
have very particular protocols around when somebody enters the chamber to make sure that we are putting somebody in and diving them using the Navy vernacular around it. The, so we do call it a dive, but we do it in the safest way imaginable.
I've seen one of these chambers. It was a smaller one, and it didn't have the bed in it or anything. This was just it had a bench. It was a beautiful little glass box, that they had, and I don't know if they're like that, but you mentioned the claustrophobia thing. I think one of the reasons why I'm really glad that we're doing this is there's a lot of people who have seen maybe on TV or maybe on commercials or something where the people take and they get into the clam looking thing that also has water and it shuts down on them. And they're like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. So, uh,
Nor would I.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, very unlikely that I would do that either. But what are some of the things that do happen to people that are, that people do stress out about when they go into 'em?
Yeah, we typically, we're going to have people who have anxiety going into a
Uh,
chamber,
yeah.
and we can talk about PTSD. I mean, there's a perfect
Hmm.
example.
Yep.
So if you have PTSD, they might be challenged by getting into that chamber. We definitely talk them through that if they're on meds, for instance. At least initially in treatment, don't go off of your anxiety meds before getting treatment. Of course, we've had veterans and other people who've had high anxiety. They're on medication, and by the time they get through midway through the treatment program, they can actually back off their medications, which is the great thing about it. That means the brain is healing because that reaction, that anxiety in that, or claustrophobia, that's the brain not functioning in a good, healthy manner. That's really all it is. Uh, it's a physiological reaction. That's a reaction to what's happening physically within the brain. You heal the brain, those things actually fade away. Claustrophobia. So just to give you exactly give you an indication of this, so we have done in the 7 years we've been open, we have done over 6,000 individual treatment sessions. I have never had to pull somebody out of the medical grade chamber ever because they're anxious or claustrophobic and that's just it's our preparation for the patient when getting them in the chamber. It's the understanding that they have an escape hatch, so to speak, that they can get out of that chamber if absolutely necessary. That there's somebody there who is monitoring that chamber, that they can move around, that they can read a book, these factors and the size of the chamber, it's far bigger than like an MRI machine. Again, it's quiet. There's windows in it. Um, and there's, communication, although that's the same in an MRI. But there's a lot of things that are very different that allow for it to be a relaxing experience.
I remember one time, and this has nothing to do with any of this, but you brought up an MRI, and they took and I went in for an MRI, and they put me on that table and started to have the table slide into the tube, and all of a sudden they noticed that I stopped, and so they backed it out a little bit and tried to go again, and I stopped again. And they backed it out and they tried to go one more time. And I finally had to ask him, so when are you going to realize that my shoulders are hitting it and I do not fit in this too? And so that was an interesting experience. I'll tell you this, by that time, I was pretty stressed out, because it was like, okay, we're not paying attention here, and that's really not what I want to hear. But you had mentioned to me prior that you and your wife have experience with traumatic brain injury. One of the things that I deal with on my TBI is if I get into like a higher pressured area, my head feels like it's going to explode. Is this something I would experience in one of these chambers?
I have never had that. Um, I have never had that experience with somebody. There is one thing. So you asked me a question just, about it. So there's two instances where you that are absolute no-goes in a hyperbaric chamber. Those two are, and actually somebody called us today with this, a collapsed lung or pneumothorax.
Okay.
And yep, you're in the hospital, so you're not getting in a chamber anyway. But the pressure would actually continue to collapse the lung. So you don't put somebody in who has a collapsed lung. The other is barotrauma or severe barotrauma. So let's say somebody has a bad virus or a bad head cold. You don't put somebody in the chamber because it will increase the pressure. Um, we do very carefully walk people through the pressurization process. So this probably answers your question well. This is part of our pre-talk when we're putting somebody in the chamber. A hyperbaric chamber, particularly our medical grade hyperbaric chamber, operates the same way as a plane does. How do I know this? The person who originally owned the chamber was an overseas airline pilot. So he uses this as an analogy all the time. So you're going up here we are in Durango at 7,500 feet or 6,500 feet, and we're going up to 36,000 feet. What are they doing in that process? They're pressurizing the cabin to somewhere around sea level, somewhere in that neighborhood. And if you ever have to clear your ears when you're going up in a plane, you will probably have to clear your ears when you get into a hyperbaric chamber, or they'll get uncomfortable. Same process. So we walk people through, what can you do if this arises? I have to clear my ears. I've been in a hyperbaric chamber well over 100 times. Every single time I go in the chamber, I have to clear my ears constantly in order to relieve the pressure in my ears, in my eustachian tubes. So if swallowing works, great. If jutting your jaw forward opens up your eustachian tubes, great. If you need to take your mask off and pinch your nose and do the Valsalva maneuver and blow to clear your ears out, do that. If you do it early and often, you will not have a problem with the pressure. And that's one of the main reasons why we don't have to take people out of the chamber. We also have the ability to slow the compression process so somebody can take the time to clear their ears if they're having a problem clearing their ears. So we can back the pressure off. We can take it down. and then repressurize. So there's ways to work with issues when they come up with people, including anxiety. We will spend time on the intercom and talking to people on the intercom and talking them through a 5-step breathing process. So this is good for anybody. This doesn't matter if you're in hyperbarics or not. So if you do a 5 count breath in, hold at the top, and release that breath in a 5 count, your parasympathetic nervous system that's working overtime and getting anxious will calm down. So you can use this anywhere. You're in traffic and you're PO'd at the person in front of you. Do the 5-step breathing process. It'll help take you down and take that anger and anxiety down and being in traffic.
It's angry
So,
driving.
yeah,
What about you mentioned no electronics, but what about pacemakers?
that's an excellent question. So most older pacemakers cannot go into a hyperbaric chamber at higher pressures. What we need to do in those cases is if somebody has a pacemaker, particularly if it's an older one, we have to defer to the manufacturing company and find out how it's been tested. Because all of those medical devices have been tested under pressure. The question is, what's the pressure that that device can actually still operate well in? So we've actually had people, particularly in our mild hyperbaric chamber with pacemakers, because there are new models. The newer models can go to much greater pressures than our chambers can go to. So yeah, it is a case by case basis. The rule of thumb is defer to the manufacturer of a pacemaker as to whether or not a patient can get in the chamber or not.
Okay. Um, this is a it seems like it's a silly question, but I think it's really important. Somebody who's struggling with PTSD, they come to see you, they get into a chamber. Exactly what is it about this treatment that helps them start seeing things clear?
Around PTSD, so I go back again, and it's great because the important points should be pointed out, numerous times. So when somebody has a PTSD or they have any other kind of disorder, let's say it's ADD, ADHD, bipolar, multiple personality disorders, PTSD, if you actually look at the brain, and the way to look at it is actually through what's called SPECT imagery. And I won't go into the details of that, but basically what that shows is it shows, sorry about that. Um, I thought that I had put that in airplane mode. So in those cases, um, what happens even in those is, so we look at, let's say, a concussive force, something that hits you in the head, and it hits you here in the head. So your temporal lobe gets injured. When we look at the brain and we actually look at disorders like PTSD, it actually shows up as a very specific pattern of insufficiency of blood flow and actually function in the brain. And the thing is that you have mechanisms and you have different ways that can actually help to heal that portion of the brain. So there's actually a physical abnormality in the brain that shows that there's not good blood flow. I wish I actually just had a chart to put up in the camera right now that shows it. But insufficiency of blood flow and improper function of the brain, and it will show both in it. When you're in a hyperbaric chamber, what it does, again, is you're taking the inflammatory process out, you're maximizing the oxygenation of the blood supply that's carrying nutrients into an area that has been impacted. Now, it's not a physical impact, but it still shows the same type of injury to the brain or deficiency in the brain as getting hit. It's actually not, it's not any different. The difference is that you're displaying some form of a mood disorder or PTSD, something like that, PTSD being a mood disorder. So it's actually physically healing the brain so that the PTSD falls away. Here's another part. So PTSD, you're bringing this up, or anxiety. In a brain injury treatment program, there's actually markers in a treatment program that we look at, uh, and particularly with veterans. What we see is at 10 sessions into a treatment program, they're starting to get and show physiological changes. So basic things from a traumatic brain injury and or PTSD, and they usually go together. They're inseparable. What happens is at that time is the headaches start to drift away. They're sleeping better. Um, the cognitive clarity, the brain fog that comes with a brain injury, these things start to fall away and they start going, oh, so I can see that I'm beginning to heal. These things are starting to change. If you're getting good sleep, your brain has an opportunity to heal. That's physiological fact. When we get into the middle of the treatment program, a little further into the treatment program, there's usually a point in time where the brain is healing at such a rate that actually um, somebody who's had a traumatic event, like a veteran, uh, they actually the bad dreams that might be there, they can actually heighten for a period of time, or reliving because their brain is actually healing to such a rate that if they forgot or masked the event, they're beginning to remember what happened. What we like to see is not only do we keep a close eye on them, but we actually, when they're working with a therapist, which, hopefully they are, that they actually step up their therapy during that period of time. And it's just to help walk through this few days where they might experience that. And then after that few days is that going through a hard period and then getting to the other side of it and the greener pastures where that's healed to such a degree that if they're in therapy and that they can actually walk through that in a much easier way. But it is, again, it's a it's a physical injury to the brain, really. It shows as a physical injury to the brain.
It was just my next question was going to be, should somebody have like a secondary or an additional therapy going on when they're doing this? You mentioned maybe having some talk therapy going on with this, or another type of therapy to use this and to combine. That way, you make sure that everything um, is taking effect properly. So, what about any other? After this, I'll let you go, George. But what about physical limitations? Are there people other than obviously the ones we've already talked about? Are there physical limitations that keep people out of these chambers?
Yes, there are. Because of the type of chamber that we have, the one limitation with the particular chamber we have is you are not put on a gurney and rolled into the chamber. So you alluded to, Zach, a little bit earlier, these acrylic chambers, you can see through them. They roll you in a gurney, and you're kind of locked and loaded, so to speak, in the chamber in there. You can't really move around all that much in that. However, if you have somebody who's non-ambulatory, it's far easier to have somebody on a gurney and move them into the chamber. And or you don't have to wear a hood system or a mask because it's a fully oxygenated atmosphere. But the flip side of that is that's why our chamber is a safer atmosphere to be in general. because it's not pressurized with oxygen. It's actually pressurized with ambient air pulled in through the compressor, and that's how the chamber is compressed. So really lost the train of thought there for a second. So really, the limitations is we've had people who are post back surgery, for instance, and it's a great healing mechanism for that. However, they can't bend at the waist, they can't twist, and that. So we really can't put somebody who's immediately post-operative with like a low lumbar fusion, for instance, in those cases because of the positioning. We have had non-ambulatory traumatic brain injury cases, and we actually are able to transfer them into the chamber. In those cases, we have two people who are there. There's usually an attendant, whoever it may be, whether it's a parent or somebody who's an attendant for that individual. And we actually work together to transfer the patient into the chamber. And we've had a few of those where we've had wheelchair bound traumatic brain injuries. And in a couple of those cases, famously, they got to either walking on walkers and out of their wheelchair because it does actually promote motor function returning because of that neurological impact and healing neurological cells. So we've had people who've gone from walkers to nothing and walking across the room. We've had people who are wheelchair bound. Now, does that happen all the time? Entirely depends on the individual case. How long is the injury been there? How extensive is it? What's the age of the patient? There's a number of different factors that come into how somebody might respond in the chamber.
Is there any negative effects if someone, say, has um, is on like blood thinners, or somebody is passing a stone, or anything like that? Have you ever had any problems with any of that?
No, the one interesting and obscure case that we could not put in the chamber, it doesn't happen very often. There are far less things that you can put somebody in the chamber for than you can put the chamber in for and will benefit from it. So if you have a rare blood disorder where you're producing too many red blood cells, that actually is a contraindication. Or I can use this as an example. And again, it's because each patient is it's on a case by case basis. There's the absolute no-goes, which are that pneumothorax or collapsed lung and barotrauma. Those are the absolutes. The other ones are generally on a case by case basis. So what we know from research that's out there is if somebody has COPD, for instance, if somebody's in early stage COPD, then a hyperbaric chamber is actually indicated and will actually produce greater longevity for that individual. If somebody's in a more advanced stage of COPD, they can't synthesize oxygen as well. So if you're pushing more oxygen at them, it's actually a contraindication. So it's the answer to the question is it's on a case by case basis. Uh, Mild forms of asthma, yes, and it's managed well, yes, you can put that person in the chamber. If somebody has a bad case of asthma or exercise-induced asthma that's bad, you can't in those particular cases. So you have to take each patient as an individual, look at their health history in depth, and make a good educated call on whether or not it's going to benefit. The thing is, the worst thing that happens is, and this was in that really obscure blood-borne where they're producing way too many blood cells. In that particular case, there was no there was no information, there were no studies, there was nothing in regards to that. So you monitor a chamber and you monitor it closely, and the patient wasn't doing very well in the early stages. So we pulled them out of the chamber. That's all.
George, I really appreciate this. I think this is very interesting. I really like the way that, look, this is This is definitely one of those programs, one of those procedures that I think people who are trying to stay away from drugs or alcohol, or they're trying to stay away from prescriptions, this would be something that would be very beneficial to them. Of course, we want to make sure that if people are coming in, they talk to their doctors and
Yeah.
make sure that, their doctors understand what's going on. Because look, your doctors know you a little bit more than you guys do. So if you approach your doctor and they say, "Oh, not sure if that's a good idea," at least they can be involved in that decision.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely defer to a physician. Absolutely. I am not a doctor. We defer to the physician we work with, or if it's somebody else who's referring from the outside, a physician, and that their opinion is the opinion that matters.
George, how do they get a hold of you, my friend?
Our clinic number is 970-880-4799, or you can email us at mountainhyperbarics, lowercase, at gmail.com. We also have a website, mountainhyperbarics.com.
You guys, just real quick, give a shout out to the organization that you are working with that is helping our country's heroes.
Oh, absolutely, and always do. America's Mighty Warriors. The program within America's Mighty Warriors we work with is called Helping Heroes Heal. They also have a website. All the information that you need to know is there. They're happy to talk to veterans and see if they're a fit in the program. And actually, they are very efficient in turnaround time. You will not wait. You will not wait weeks. They will call you within 24, 48 hours is probably the longest I've heard any veteran needing to wait for an answer. But you're talking about veterans who are in that organization. Cowie, who's the spearhead of the organization and fields all the calls and qualifies people for treatment and everything. He's a vet. He's a vet who had hyperbaric treatment, and it worked so amazing for him. It turned around his life. He went to work for the organization. So,
Yep. One more time, your phone number and your email address.
yeah, our phone number is 970-880-4799. And our email address is all lowercase mountainhyperbarics@gmail.com.
George Glass, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. If you guys have anything come up, come back and talk to us.
All right. Thanks very much for having me, Zach. I appreciate it.
No problem.